So we're here today with Dr. Gary Burlingame, who's been granted AGPA's highest honour of Distinguished Fellow. And Dr. Burlingame has had an incredibly distinguished career. He has really set the standard for outcome evaluation, for assessment and measurement of group, in a way that's had national and international significance. He's also provided the summaries to the field that have guided practice for practitioners all over the world in how they think about how to conduct group and also how to measure the outcomes of group, and given it a stable footing amongst the scientific community that has added immeasurably to the standing of group in the field. So, a very deserving honour. So what I'd like to ask Gary is, this is a moment, in your career, a moment in your life to just sort of reflect and say, this is where I am. And my question really is, where did all this start? Where did your passion for the field begin?
That's a really good question. I think I've been a group guy before I knew I was a group guy. If you think back to early years, I ended up using groups, in my building life when I was in high school and college. But I think I landed on it clearly with a mentor, Addie Furman, who put a context or a frame around some of my interest in groups. And it was a wonderful partnership. And we ran groups together, and then we took what we saw in the group room and got curious about it. And I think that's sort of the launching pad, doing therapy and then wondering what is it that's working and what's not working. So I'd say that was the beginning, and I did that as a graduate student. It was a pretty wonderful opportunity to run groups with your mentor.
So it sounds like this sort of curiosity was a big driving early force.
Yeah. Well, we're herd animals, right? I mean, we grow up in groups, we work in groups, we get hurt by groups.
Yeah.
And it just always seemed natural to me. It's not that I don't value individual therapy, but there's a power that I saw early on. When I was in high school, I was a member of an encounter group.
Were you?
And saw the power of group as a member. So I think that goes back a ways, Martyn. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, yeah. So what drives your passion? What drove your passion then? What drives your passion now? Because you're prolific. You really have a lot of energy for group. But there's a passion there as well. What stokes your passion about group?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I love getting students excited about this. We've got a wonderful lab, and we have 2 big sandboxes. And I have a graduate student here at this conference doing his first solo presentation on group. That just makes me happy. So I think our productivity, is the way I would think of what we do, is a function of running a healthy lab, a healthy group. So we'll generally have about a half a dozen faculty. Many of them are clinicians. And so what we try to study is what they're dealing with in their groups. So one of the labs is a counseling center that runs 25, 30 groups a semester. And the other is a state hospital, and it runs 300 groups a week. So we don't aren't hurting for groups to study.
Right.
And some of the issues are the same, and some of them are different. But it's kind of, for me, it's getting. I guess it's trying to be practical. And the outcome stuff that you mentioned a moment ago, that's trying to be practical. I see us as sort of applied scientists. That makes sense?
Absolutely. Yeah. So what do you think people don't know that you wish you could tell them about group?
You mean about group?
Yeah.
It's okay to let go of control. I think many of the mistakes I've made as a clinician, and many of the mistakes when I'm starting to train students to run a group, are hanging on to the reins too tightly. And if you can help people understand the rhythm, the group dynamic, that there is a healing pattern, and learn to recognize it and trust it, you're going to have a much better experience than if you're trying to orchestrate. I think that's one of the things that's misunderstood about our work, is I think people see us that we're trying to do as being prescriptive. But the power of group, there's very little percentage points, I would say, that is associated with the prescriptive nature of a group therapist. It's giving them the boundaries, the empirical, the theoretical boundaries that allow them to move forward.
Right.
Make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah. So what would you tell, mentorship is very important to you. What other lessons would you want to pass on to mentees, to new people just starting with group? Not just control, but also here's what to pay attention to, here's what not to pay attention to.
Yeah. Well, in a way, there's a lot to know, right? And for us, I think, we've got probably 100 years of experience when we put our lab together, and the men and women that are in it. And we're all still humble enough to sort of say, what can we learn?
Sure.
And so for me, I guess I'd invite people to focus and learn a bit about group dynamics. In a meeting that you and I were in just a few hours ago, we talked about the new principle course and the book. So get clear on the theory.
Right.
Get clear on the empirical science.
Right.
That can take away some of the anxiety. And then I would invite them to be playful.
Right. Right.
The group I'm running right now in a state hospital, being a part of what we try to do is not take ourselves too seriously.
Right.
And these are patients that fit that serious mental illness
Absolutely.
category, but there's some playfulness that's helpful.
So sort of almost a letting go is, I think, the theme is trusting the group, letting go, enjoy, relax.
Yeah. And then let, if you're curious, go see what others have researched about what you're curious about. I mean, if we follow our lab's history, it's been going on for several decades now. I mean, what we started out in the 80s being curious about was this sort of moment by moment kind of patterns, therapeutic patterns, using the Hill interaction matrix. And there's value there.
Sure.
And then I think we moved to being curious about, what if I listen to the client's voice? which is where we generated selection measures, we generated process measures, we generated outcome measures. And for us, that's been a good ride. Because listening to the client voice can be quite instructive, especially if you listen to all the voices in the group.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, your career has really spanned, like I said, depth and breadth. You know, you've really done everything from consultation to research to mentoring to teaching. If you could pick two or three things that you would say, I have a real sense of pride in those two or three things. I feel really good about those. What would you say? Knowing that there's more and that you'll probably later today think, you know, oh, I could have said this, but what would be the things?
I think there's a couple things that are tied for first in my mind. I mentioned structure a moment ago, which is kind of what we've tried to do with paying attention to developing effectiveness guidelines. So we had the honor and privilege of picking up the Bergen and Garfield handbook chapter. We just finished our process of updating that, and in the process of doing that, we looked at 69,000 papers that popped up in our searches. And so a part of what we try to do there is pay attention to the individual disorders that folks walk in and try to give some guidelines. What works, what maybe you shouldn't try because the evidence isn't there. And I'm proud of that. I think I'm proud of it partly because of the science piece, but as a very practical way of guiding groups. And the literature now, Martyn, is international.
Absolutely.
And so it's fun to see how this is applied in other culturally sensitive ways, China and other areas. And I think this thing that's tied to that is our work with outcome. And this was something that started in 1990 with my colleague and friend Mike Lambert. And the group measures are a way of taking the pulse of the group, but the outcome measures are a way of taking the pulse of the individual. And knowing who might be suffering silently in a group, who might be deteriorating. And as you know, we developed a system for tracking on a session-by-session basis and flagging treatment failures, right?
And that's such a legacy as well, in sense of think how many people who have been helped who might otherwise have dropped out.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a really profound kind of legacy amongst all the other ones.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of, Mike and I sort of are surprised by that because we just did it in a kind of a fun way. And now, I mean, it's literally all over the world. I think some 50 plus languages. These measures, and they touch millions of lives every week. I mean, it's pretty amazing when you think about it. But yeah, I'm proud of that.
Yeah, it's remarkable. I mean, if you think about the breadth of the impact.
Yeah, it's a small group product, though. You know, both of us had labs, and we trusted in the power of our students and their groups and that.
Well, I just also want to say, is there anything else that you'd like to share? I mean, I've asked different. Is there a question you wish I'd asked you, or something you'd like to share as you know, as a summary of your time right now that you feel like, you know, this has been important to me in my career?
You know, I think one of the honors that AGPA has that I've participated in, and I don't know of another organization like this, Martyn. Is the institute groups. So people come here not only to learn, but to participate. And I've continued that through. I'm a member of a men's group right now, and I just think my encouragement would be that people practice what they preach, and continue to learn about oneself and what's it like for me to be in this group, right? And what does it bring out that I wasn't aware of? You know, the old Johari window, right? So it's a lifelong opportunity that AGPA creates through the Institute groups.
So it sounds like you're both fed AGPA and the body of group work, and you got something from AGPA too.
Very much so.
Very much.
It's reciprocal, and that's what groups are, right?
Yeah.
A member gives and receives, and a leader gives and receives.
Absolutely. Well, I think we're coming to a close. Do you have any last thoughts before we...
Well, I just am honored and humbled by the distinguished fellow, and this is my home. So it's nice to have some acknowledgement. Appreciate that so much.
This is Gary Burlingame, Distinguished Fellow.